All right, we're not going to have you jump up and down with me on this
Yeah.
one here. So was it, stair jumping?
It was one of the least spectacular ski falls I've had in almost 40 years of skiing. My recommendation is if you ever break a bone while doing any snow sports, make sure it's above the boot line. 'Cause
Ouch.
getting the boot off
Oh,
is no fun.
oh.
I feel like I'm at the right place though. Like there's got to be someone here that can help me get it sort of
Well, yeah,
regenerated
actually,
more
last year
quickly.
at Platinum, we had one of our entrepreneur scientists was regrowing bone, cartilage, ligaments. So if you need some extra parts, we can get
Well, there's
those
about a half a pound of extra metal in there right now.
Oh,
But
crazy. Well, thank you for joining us. I had a chance to come and visit Wing and learn about our common aviation passion. You had known about my work from the X Prize early on, and obviously I had known about your work really coming out of Google X. Can you speak to the birth of this company first off, and what problem is it solving?
yeah, I mean, we are largely trying to solve the sort of the final challenges around last mile logistics, right? Like I think that as you and sort of the AI intro gave, people expect stuff to get delivered today. They expect it to happen quickly. They expect it to happen seamlessly.
Love these
And
videos, by the way.
yeah, this is all real stuff. We were born out of the Moonshot factory, sort of before Alphabet became Alphabet. We were part of Google X. We were one of the first projects there. And the idea was really like, how do you solve last mile delivery with automation? I happen to have been a lifelong aviation person, like yourself, and so this was like the dream opportunity to me is sort of come to Google, get to sort of experiment with what it would be like to build a business from the ground up around that delivery challenge, and we are clearly sort of in reality right now. We alphabetized, sort of became our own company in 2018. Have been driving at sort of how we build out this delivery business and really make it so that anybody around the world, sort of within a moment's notice.
Rain, sleet, or snow, huh?
Yeah, that's the, you really want to be in the position where any conditions you'd reasonably drive your car in, you'd want to get the packages delivered.
Amazing. So talk to me about your current operational coverage here. When you started operations, how many deliveries per day are you doing now?
Yeah, so we are sort of have operations mostly in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in the U.S. today, in Brisbane and Melbourne in Australia, and then a handful of smaller operations in Virginia, the U.K., sort of spread all about. The bulk of our deliveries right now happen in DFW. Our main partner there is with Walmart. We're at 18 supercenters with them. Airplanes going out delivering boxes every day. To date, we've done about 450,000 deliveries and counting. And for our busier stores, that'll look like on the order of like 100 to 200 deliveries a day. So this is really sort of out of the trial phase and into the growth phase.
And talk about the growth phase. So it's 2025. By 2030, when the digital superintelligence show up and they start ordering stuff, what's coverage and delivery rate look like 5 years out?
Yeah, I mean, I think the real goal for us is getting to that sort of 100 million a year mark.
100 million
Deliveries
a year.
transactions a year, and that if you baseline that against a lot of the sort of food aggregator type delivery services, or somebody like FedEx, UPS, they're doing 2 million-ish deliveries a day. On the food side, 9-10 million a day. On the package side, for our business to sort of get to that scaled out place, you're looking at on the order of 250,000 deliveries a day.
Amazing. So, I mean, one of the things, if you think about it, when you order something on DoorDash or Uber delivery or whatever the other ones are, I don't use them all that often, you're basically commanding a 5,000-pound vehicle and human to deliver you, sometimes a few ounces of materials. It's kind of inefficient.
That was one of the sort of main theses here, not just on the sort of economic side where it doesn't make sense to be moving, a hamburger with a multi-thousand-pound car. But additionally, just on the single most dangerous thing most people do every day is get in a car.
Yeah.
And so, one of the conversations I frequently have with regulators around the world is like drone delivery is not just sort of an economic engine, it's also a safety engine where
Love that.
sort of every one of these deliveries that's happening with one of our, 10, 15-pound aircraft is replacing a trip that would be happening with a vehicle that is, many orders of magnitude less safe.
So I used to build RC airplanes like you did, and this looks really familiar in terms of the materials here, styrofoam. How did this design evolve, Adam?
Yeah, I think so. A lot of us at Wing came from traditional aviation backgrounds, and sort of low cost is not one of the things that's usually associated with building airplanes, right? Like the joke in aerospace is the only thing that goes up over time on an airplane project is weight and budget. You never get more performance. And the challenge for us was like, how do you build an aerospace reliable aircraft? So this is like get to the 10 to the minus 9 sort of like commercial aviation standard.
1 in a billion, right?
Yeah, at consumer electronics prices. And we had to start from the ground up. Like you couldn't take sort of any legacy aviation processes or programs. And that was one of the sort of, great gifts that we had early on at the time of Google X was that sort of like completely greenfield thinking and being able to come at a problem from a direction that really nobody had done before.
And I think one of the things that drives moonshots, people don't realize, you think about, think out of the box. I think one of the most important things you can do is think in a very constrained box.
Yeah.
What's the price point on this sort of vehicle here?
These are, again, they sort of run like consumer electronics prices. So, think of, a couple of cell phones type of costs here.
Yeah.
Most of the expensive parts on the airplane are back here in the computer. The rest, as you saw, is like styrofoam, little bits of carbon. Early on, we're actually making the airframes in a bike helmet factory because they were one of the only places that could make low-cost precision molded parts. But the idea here is that the airplanes are more or less a sort of consumable asset, which is something that is sort of not traditional in aviation. And in doing so, sort of everything around here is optimized around how do you make it reliable first?
Yep.
And then how do you make it low cost? And then sort of a deep third, which is usually the number one driver, is performance. So we make a lot of performance trades. It's why it has so many props on it so that things can fail and it can keep going. It's why it's sort of basically a multi-rotor sort of smushed together with an airplane. So if any of the hover parts break, it can go fly like a plane. Any of the plane parts break, it can go fly like a helicopter.
Amazing. And the device that lowers down the package, I always find that fascinating because I just have to imagine there are countless dogs and kids who want to just yank that thing and try and catch themselves a drone in the sky.
Yeah, that's one of the questions we get the most often is like, has anybody shot at it, or has anybody tried to go throw rocks at it or pull it out of the sky? That's one of the reasons we don't land or even get close to the ground is that you want to be up and away from people. You also want to be up and away from most of the things that are in residential neighborhoods like power lines and trees and stuff. But we lower down the package on a tether there when we go outside, and you can see it in action.
Yeah, we're going to actually see this flying and delivering all of you stuff during the lunch hour. Even though it might be drizzling and raining, it's all weather, but we're going to have some fun with this later.
And that's one of those places where sort of plan for failure is the sort of name of the game on the package delivery side. Now, you could think about, okay, you've got a rope hanging off the plane. What if somebody grabs it? Should we have line cutters or a line detector that, it's like somebody's pulling on it? We basically just don't attach the line to the inside of the plane. It's just up on the spool. If somebody happens, like a kid runs out, grabs the tether, or a dog grabs the package, the plane will just fly away and they leave behind the string.
Talk about simplicity. I love that. Let's talk about the consumer experience and the what do you call the other one? The merchant experience. So how does this work? I sign up for Google Wing. I get an app.
Yeah, it depends largely on sort of which partner we're working with. So with folks like Walmart and DoorDash, sort of we've integrated into their marketplaces. So if you're in our area of operation in Dallas or
And soon the whole U.S., I assume.
that's where we'd like to get to, but we're still sort of city by city at the moment. If you're in an area where we do deliver, you can download their marketplace, go on it, and it will show you like here are the items that are deliverable by drone. So obviously like this plane is not going to go do your weekly sort of load of groceries, but it will do dinner. It will do a lot of the use cases we get are like forgotten items. So let's say you just got back from your weekly trip to the store and you realize, hey, I forgot heavy whipping cream or I forgot limes or something like that. Rather than getting back in your car, going back out, plane can bring it to you. So customers will go through the normal order flow. And the one difference for us versus like a delivery driver is the customer gets to pick sort of where on their property the box will get dropped off.
So you've got sort of imagery from Google Maps.
Yeah, we use sort of a lot of existing map pieces, terrain data bits to have the airplane sort of before it ever takes off say within this city, here are all the places where we could drop off a box.
So see if your house qualifies.
Yep. So if your house qualifies, and normally for us, it's about if you go stand on your property, put your arms out, and look up to the sky and not see like a tree hanging over you, we can get the box into that spot.
Amazing. That's extraordinary accuracy. So you click order. You identified where on your property, and how long does it take for it to be delivered?
It's usually just a couple minutes. So the airplanes fly at basically highway speeds, and they don't have to deal with traffic
or find a parking spot.
And so typically the actual like pick pack or preparing time is longer than the delivery time, and will be our fastest flights have been just a couple minutes to get to a customer, but on average they're usually 3-4 minutes.
I mean that's pretty amazing, huh? Pretty extraordinary.
And it's one of the things that
let's give it up for that. Give it up for the laws of physics.
Yeah. Turns out airplanes are pretty good at moving fast. One of the sort of unique things about that we've seen as well as we've introduced this to more and more people is that time is like extremely accurate. So you're not getting a delivery window that's like your box is going to arrive between noon and 5 p.m. It's like your box is going to arrive in 3 minutes and 58 seconds, and that countdown is accurate until you'll be at 10 and you'll see the plane show up. And that changes customer behaviors, right? You see the people using the service in a way that's fundamentally different from sort of existing delivery options.
That's beautiful. How about on the merchant side? So in the future, you've gone beyond just Walmart, and I'm a bakery shop. Yeah. How do I interface?
One of the things that we identified early on, and a lot of this comes from experience that all of us had in sort of other sort of drone operations where you think about a drone doesn't have a person in it, but there's usually a lot of people associated with the operation, sort of maintaining it, tending to it, flying it. And for the promise of this to really work, it needs to, the robot needs to do all the robot stuff.
Fully autonomous. Yeah.
And one of the pieces that we identified in our conversations with merchants was their workflows are already hyper optimized. So you go look at the pick, pack, and fulfillment in a big box store, or you go and talk to any of the food aggregators about sort of how they allocate delivery drivers and pieces like this. They are optimizing around the margins, and you can't just be like, hey, we've got this cool technology.
Right.
Could you redo how you guys do store pickup? And so we decided, pretty early on, we wanted to replicate the order flows that they have in the store already and make it sort of as seamless to integrate as possible. So we developed some interesting bits of hardware to be able to do automated pickup of the boxes, so the airplane can show up to a spot that somebody has left a package, and it can pick it up without a person having to be there. And then working sort of all the sort of back-end API side to connect into their order flows, connect into their stock systems and bits like that, so that drone delivery is not this cool technology that becomes a burden on the store. It's truly something that every delivery that can go to the plane is one that makes more sense for the operation. And that's the sort of corner bakery example. We've seen this particularly in our operations in Australia. You're now able to offer delivery to businesses that didn't have access to it before. And the amount of extra customers that can onboard, the amount of sort of different items that we deliver a lot of ice cream. Right? One of the most frequently delivered items in Australia was prepared hot coffee. And you think about it, like that isn't going to survive a normal delivery experience. By the time it gets there, it's going to be melted or cold or spilled. And so the sort of immediacy element of it opens up a lot more doors on how things can work.
I'm just watching the video here, and again, the idea that it's dropped, and I see here, add item. The entire system is fully automated. There's no human in the loop here.
So we have what you would call sort of human on the loop. So we exist in aviation, which, as you know, is an incredibly regulated industry.
My favorite motto of the FAA is the FAA is not happy until you're not happy.
Oh, I mean, they have a hard job, right? And you think about how safe air transportation is. That's because of all that oversight.
Yes.
But we have to fit into that framework. So we need to have a pilot. That pilot obviously doesn't sit in the airplane. I've checked, like there's no little seats in there. The business sort of also doesn't make sense if you have one pilot sitting at a computer screen looking at one airplane. You need to get to one pilot controlling whole fleets of aircraft or whole sort of regions of aircraft. And so we've adopted what looks a lot more like a sort of dispatcher and fleet manager model where the pilots are still sort of maintaining that operational control, sort of like fulfilling those regulatory
oversight, basically.
But they're basically just there to sort of like monitor the operations. And if there's a big thunderstorm rolling through or something like that, they can make a fleet-wide decision rather than sort of addressing unique aircraft.
Amazing. Talk to me 1 second about this phrase you've used, that you want to make drone delivery as commonplace as shopping carts. What does that mean for you?
I think for people who've lived in aviation our whole lives, it's very familiar. But I think the statistic is less than 5% of the global population has been on an airplane.
That's a pretty extraordinary number.
So, like, aviation is still this incredibly rare asset. It's still, relatively high cost to entry, and its benefits are sort of well known and amazing. I want to get to the place where, that number is much higher, and people's experience with aviation, sort of the first time, might be with one of our aircraft. And I think that this is a place where I use the shopping cart analogy because like everybody's used a shopping cart. They're a critical part of the infrastructure of a store, but you don't really think about it. You're not like, hey, like what's the new shopping cart technology that's coming out? But if you didn't have them, the store wouldn't work. They're everywhere. And we're starting to see pieces of that, like in our operations with Walmart. Our airplanes are out in the parking lot. Like in many cases, they're sort of like in a little fenced-off area right next to the shopping cart stands. When we first put the sites down, there would be people who would sort of stop and look and sort of see what's happening. Now today, you go to a store and like there's planes flying over and nobody's looking up. And that's my dream, is to get to a place where this is so ubiquitous,
so commonplace, yeah,
that you don't even think to look up.
Yeah, our theme for the summit this year is technological convergence, and I think about this as a business enabled by convergence. So we're going to play the game of convergence a little bit later this afternoon in our next tool session. What were the technologies that came together that ignited this as a business model?
Yeah, I think that this is really one of those like necessary but not sufficient type of like all the pieces of the Venn diagram have to overlap. The first one was sort of on the pure tech side. Up until the early 2000s, sort of mid, 2008, 9. you didn't have a cheap sort of inertial measurement system. So, how the airplane tells what direction is up, how fast it's going, sort of how quickly it's moving.
I remember my first rocket company, which is circa 1990. I bought my first IMU from Litton Systems, was $50,000.
Yeah, no, and this was, you had like
ring laser gyro.
Ring laser gyros, yeah. And even as they got cheaper, you still had like discrete components integrated onto a little chip package, and you'd be paying a couple $1,000s for something that was postage stamp size. As smartphones became more ubiquitous and as sort of like doing more interesting things with cameras on smartphones, it drove towards sort of true chip scale inertial measurement systems.
So what's an IMU cost today?
Like a couple bucks.
Couple bucks.
And that was...
I overpaid back then, for sure.
Well, and that's like you now have, it's literally like a 6 millimeter square that does, all axis gyros, all axis accelerometers, that is like true commodity pricing. And that enabled a sort of boom of sort of drones that could be built for relatively low costs and operate reliably. That was the sort of technical piece. Sort of batteries have largely been good enough for about 20 years. We've yet to see sort of like the next big breakthrough where, you get a doubling of energy.
Are these lithium-ion batteries?
Yep, all sort of standard lithium-ion pouch cells. So like on the tech side, it was really the IMU. On the regulatory side, which like aviation is a fundamentally non-permissive business, which means like you can't just go and say like, hey, we're gonna go fly outside today. The baseline assumption is you don't fly, and then you have to get permissions to fly. And up until 2016, there was no legal framework in the United States to do commercial operations with a drone that didn't involve sort of going through big aviation procedures, or having a government contract to go do it under. And that enabling piece of legislation was called Part 107, which there's probably some Part 107 operators in the audience. Like if you have a little camera drone, you're probably familiar with that. But that made it so that you could start to think about how do I build a business around drones. So you have the technology's able, and then now, okay, I can actually go build the business. Due to some interesting FAA nuances and some interpretations by the Department of Commerce, for a long time you could do package delivery within line of sight under Part 107, but you couldn't charge for it, or you could charge for it, or you could do it beyond line of sight, but you couldn't charge for it. So there's this like, how do you build a business if you can't like go further? You can see. The solution to that was that we had to become an airline, basically. So we became what's called a Part 135 air carrier, which is like a sort of little
You're a Part 135
air carrier.
That's hilarious.
And you have to go through all the pieces of that. So like, Part 135 air carriers shall have seatbelts on the aircraft.
I know.
There's no seatbelts on the aircraft. Shall have a copy of the flight manual on the aircraft. You got to go through all that. So we went through all that and we became an air carrier. And then the last piece is like, does anyone actually want to use this, right? And we really saw that change in customer behavior as a result of the pandemic. Like, sort of delivery became the way of getting goods.
One of the things that Bill Gross, who spoke this morning, has an incredible TED talk that he's given, also the same DLD talk, about the single attribute that distinguished the most successful companies that he's created and measured from those that failed. And it wasn't how good your CEO was or how much capital you had. It was, could you stick around long enough to intercept good luck? Yeah. In other words, the pandemic was the piece of breaking good luck, to use Lee Stein's.
That's an interesting way to put it, but yeah.
Lee Stein's comment about looking for the prize, the gift in the disaster, that changed behavior.
Yeah, and it made people sort of fundamentally change their shopping habits, and it made businesses look differently about how they thought about in-store purchases versus online. It kickstarted a lot of folks thinking about like, okay, we need to beef up our e-commerce game, and that was a place where all of those targets that had to line up on top of each other for this business to work sort of came into place. Where it was like, okay, you've got the technology, you have the legal ability to use it, and you have a use case that makes sense and people want.
Yeah.
And when you line up all those three things, it's like a singularity of sort of business goodness.
Yeah.
That
And you need to, and we're going to talk about that later today, of what are the converging technologies that you're going to enable you to create your next iteration of your business, your moonshot. Can I throw in as well direct electric propulsion, DEP motors, and so forth into this? Or is there new materials that's enabled? Obviously, Google Maps and GPS and all of those elements.
Yeah, for us, the biggest one more recently has been sort of the advancements in sort of computer vision, particularly sort of leveraging learned models and bits like that.
I mean, just looking over here, being able to see those.
Yeah, being able to
QR
operate
codes,
in a space like this, and there's not like safety cones around there, like those people can come in and out of the parking spaces. We don't have LiDAR on the aircraft. There's not sort of like death by a million sensors. Weight is the enemy of any aircraft program. Yes. And so our task was, how do you get like really precise navigation without tons of complicated sensors? And we're doing that with just 2 stereo pairs of cameras on the bottom of the airplane, running a whole bunch of advanced vision algorithms. Like we do something called semantic segmentation, which is basically, if you think about how a toddler would like sort blocks, our airplane is classifying things of like tree, car, house. And rather than being like, okay, let's come up with a detailed point cloud of that tree, we instead say, okay, that blob looks like a tree. It matches good enough, and sort of let's avoid that.
Last question as we go towards lunch. What are we going to see in the demonstration outside?
You'll see this airplane. Well, not this exact one, but this one flying around. They're gonna, I think you should be able to see from the hill down where the airplanes live. We call this the nest, sort of where they sit in charge. Planes will take off. They'll fly up the hill. They'll lower down the boxes. We'll have somebody there that will let folks go up and get the packages. And I think there's some.
How many will be doing this? How often? How frequently?
Should be every couple minutes or so.
So every couple minutes, you're going to see a drone flying up, dropping down a box. In the box will be delivered a number of gifts. So you're going to get basically I don't know how we're doing it, Julie, but some representation that you can get a Prolon 5-day fast, which I love. You can get Danger Coffee, Generation Lab. Abra is going to be giving you a chance to win $2,500 in Bitcoin. We're going to have a Starlink being one of those, might be a Starlink, and a friend's headband. So these are some of the gifts. So if you go down there and when one of these is being delivered, you grab one of your little packages. Think of it as sort of a Chinese fortune cookie. Inside will be one of these gifts. So I'm excited to see this happen, and your operators will be there to answer additional questions for the members.
Yep. We'll have folks out there to talk to you about airplanes. I also love talking about airplanes. So
come see. You'll be outside there, Adam.
And thank you very much for having me.
Let's give it up here for Adam and Wing.